Now, I love a nice garden. I love walking in places with green grass and nice flowers and nice trimmed hedges where everything is beautifully in order. I remember when I went to the Holy Land and all the pilgrimage sites there were beautiful, and you must think there must be a gardener on that all the time to keep it so lovely. But although I like nice gardens and nice natural places, all you have to do is look at the garden outside my house to know that I don't like gardening. In fact, I'd rather not look at my garden and spare my eyes the sight of my own laziness, because I just can't stand mowing the lawn or trimming the hedges. So everything is a bit overgrown. And in fact, it only gets mowed when a kind parishioner says, "Father, you need to mow that lawn." I'm like, there you go, there's the lawnmower. And they do it for me. I know, how lazy is that? But that's the problem. It's nice to like a nice garden or something that's well in order, but in order to keep it in order, one has to make the effort to trim back, to prune, to cut, and keep things in order. And that really is the lament of God in the first reading from Isaiah. He's lamenting the fact that the people of Israel have not taken care of the vineyard that he has placed them in charge of, the vineyard being themselves as a very nation. He has taken them out from Egypt, he has freed them from slavery and established them as a people with a definite piece of land, with a promise of milk and honey. And yet things have gone awry very, very quickly. Now, why do things go awry? Often, in the scriptures we'll say it's sin. But what is the source of sin? I think, and the scriptures testify, that it's actually fear. Fear is what causes us to sin, because fear causes us to lose trust in the one we are called to trust in, God. Think of Adam and Eve in the garden. When did things start to go wrong for them? The moment that they listened to the serpent. That small voice of doubt which said, "Does God really care for you as he says? Why didn't you go it alone? Look after yourselves." And that's when they took the fruit. And it's happened to the people of Israel. God gives them the land and says, "You care for it. You are my people, chosen among all the nations to be a light to the world, so that people may come to know my love for you, for them, through you. You are called to bear fruit." And how does a vineyard bear fruit? By letting it be overgrown? No, because what happens is what happens in the first reading. The grapes grow sour. They're called to bear fruit, but because of fear of losing what they have as a nation, they in fact allow themselves to be overrun. The vineyard overgrows, it produces sour grapes. They even demand a king from the Lord, even though the Lord said, "I am your king." And they become like all the other countries in the world, not a people set apart, but very much part of the undergrowth around them. And without God, they are small, and they get trampled underfoot. Fear causes them to hedge themselves in and close off the one source of life which would have kept them healthy, which is the living God. The God who always prunes and cares for his vineyard. And he called them to do the same. Because it's only by pruning the vine at the right times that grapes can grow. It's only by pruning at the right times that that vine which started out as one can become many. God is calling his people, Israel, his church, to growth, to bear fruit, fruit that lasts, to become the wine of joy, of fellowship, and of friendship. But pruning requires sacrifice. It requires pain. If you ask a vine, if a vine had intelligence and a personality, and you said, "Are you okay with me cutting off your branches every once in a while?" I'm sure it would say no. It doesn't work because that's painful. But it's necessary when it grows 2 or 3 branches and yields even more grapes. That is what Jesus is criticizing in the chief priests and the elders today. He says, "You've become so closed off that you've forgotten the prophets, the people I sent you, and even when the Son is in your midst, you don't recognize him because you're trying to protect what you have. You'd rather have something that's overgrown and covered in weeds that gives no life than to be pruned and to be the tree of life for yourselves and for others." Jesus is only interested in fruits, and if it doesn't bear fruit, elsewhere in the scriptures he says, it's taken away and thrown onto the fire. That's why we, as a church, always have to be attentive to what we are doing and how we are living, and asking ourselves the key question, not is it convenient for me, does it work for me, am I happy with the way things are, but rather, does it bear fruit? Now this is both a personal thing, but also a thing we have to consider as a whole community. You know, there's that saying, isn't it? Well, that's always the way I've done things. You know, we have traditions handed down from our families. Probably many mums here and dads here probably still do things in a similar way to their mums and dads, because you know what? I enjoyed that, so I want my kids to have that. Those are good traditions. Those are things that keep us vital. But are we exactly the same as our forebears? Of course we're not. We're unique. We vary. We prune our own lives according to our own circumstances. And so we as a church are called to be asking ourselves that one question in our personal lives, in our family lives, and in our community lives. Is what I am doing, is what we are doing, bearing fruit? Is the vine growing? Is there abundance in God's kingdom? And if there's not, that's where change is required. In fact, we find ourselves at a diocesan level going through this painful process of pruning, the diocese restructuring churches and priests, because there are fewer priests. So it says we need to prune the vine in order that we may gain more. So it looks like a loss, but the loss is only seen as a short-term thing for the long-term vision of bearing fruit, of increasing in numbers, of making more disciples of Jesus Christ. And any change in our parish community has to be with the same thing in mind. We're called to share that same vision. Not rather, does it work for me or does it work for Father James, but does it bear fruit? And can it bear fruit for the entire community? Does it grow disciples of Jesus Christ? Does it bring the stranger from the street into the church and make them feel part of a family that I was talking about last week? Is this a place where God's kingdom grows abundantly? Is this a place where the gates are always open for people to come in and share in the wine of God's kingdom? That's what we're called to be. On a personal level, in our own family lives, maybe we have practices which we're so accustomed to, we don't even see the damage they're doing us in our daily lives. But that one question that Jesus always poses to us is it bearing fruit? Is it causing increase in our lives? Is it deepening our faith and our love of God? Or is it slowly but surely, as it happened to the people of Israel over many centuries, drawing us further and further away from Him? Ultimately, that's for us personally to decide and discern through prayer and careful reflection. But it's important to have that question. And it's the question that as a community, I'm called to ask of myself and also of the community here. So in the announcements at the end of Mass, I'm talking about Mass time changes and so on and so forth. But it's with that idea in mind. Is it bearing fruit? And what part can I play as a parishioner, as your parish priest, in this change, so that the vine may be pruned in order to grow 100-fold? Amen.